little over a year ago, I bought a table saw. This one over here. The saw is nothing crazy, but it came in a box with a huge foam insert that's been taking up precious space in my tiny studio. So I'm patiently waiting for the day that it gets turned into something fun, and today's the day. Along with the foam, I'll be throwing a bunch of things at this build that I've been holding on to for a while. These are things from my collection of large bits that I've either found or have been given, including a very cool Terra Cruiser Mace missile kit, which will be the MVP of the latter portion of this build. As you can see, there are quite a few materials represented, so a variety of tools will be needed to cut everything. Also have a bandsaw and a utility knife, which I will use a lot as well. I've mentioned it multiple times since last January, but I'm currently working on getting into a new workspace, which has yet to be built. It's a long story, but that's one of the reasons I haven't been doing large builds. So you may be wondering, why am I doing this large build today? Well, my plan is to get rid of it, along with some of my other projects. So if you want to hear more about that, stick around to the end of the video. At this point in the build, I actually had no idea where I was going or what I was doing. All I knew is that I wanted it to be a playable piece of tabletop miniature wargaming or RPG terrain, and this double barrel smokestack is the first and most obvious element of the build that I worked on. But even here, as you can see, I had no idea where it was going to go. I decided to carve out some foam to make room for other elements, and as I did, a glimmer of a layout began to appear in my mind. This central spot here is perfect for an alleyway between two rows of buildings. I made a small archway to go at one end to establish the scale. The more foam I removed, the more clearly I could see where I was going. I could also see more clearly that this was going to be a Star Wars-esque cityscape, with the lightly beveled walls that are slightly wider at the bottom, soft rounded edges. The Star Wars similarity is definitely more obvious now, but it wasn't my intention when I started. But it did become a good design choice to build around. In spite of the Star Warsiness of the architecture, I wanted to stay away from any blatant Star Wars things like ship parts or moisture vaporators. That way the board can be played on using other sci-fi war games and still feel natural. These super cheap outdoor solar lights were pretty cool for kit bashing purposes as well. I bought 4 of them, but I only used 1 for this build. They've given me some inspiration for some potential future terrain. With enough material removed, the rest of the layout began to make more sense in my head. Sometimes you just gotta clear things out of the way before you can move forward. And that's kind of the theme of this whole video, actually, I suppose. Parting with things to make room for others. Even with the clearer picture in my head, I still jumped around a lot as new ideas popped into my head. That's a lot of the fun of kit bashing. And real quick, don't try what you see me doing on screen right now at home. You shouldn't cut toward your fingers like that with a utility knife. I did end up with some pretty nice stairs though. Something I really enjoyed about the early part of this build is that, different from many of my other builds, the sculpting was subtractive rather than additive, meaning I was removing material to create the shapes rather than adding material. Of course, at a certain point, the tide of the workflow shifted toward almost entirely adding things, but the subtractive stuff was fun while it lasted. There were a couple pieces I really wanted to work in, but just couldn't find a spot for, including this blue gang box. If you have suggestions for how to use this for a diorama or terrain in the future, let me know. Here you can see me working with a classic material for terrain building, which is plastic canvas, or granny grading, as some call it. I found it in 3 different grid sizes, all of which were used somewhere in this build. I did have to flame anneal all of it lightly though before gluing it down because glue tends not to stick to it. I was sure to add at least 1 round dwelling to the mix of buildings to really give it that sci-fi feel. Stacked up a variety of differently sized round things, which I topped with a cooling fan, some more plastic canvas, and then I detailed it using hoops of N-scale track underlayment. That stuff was really great for adding some quick trim. After that, I dove fully into finishing up the structural elements of the upper level, using more offcuts of styrofoam. And the goal here was to make sure that everything was accessible and connected with a traversable path, which usually helps gameplay. And it's always cool when terrain is detailed on the interior as well, but I'm not feeling cool, so I left everything solid. If anybody wants to engage in some CQB, they'll just have to use their imagination. There were a lot of sections of foam that would have been a lot easier to cut with my hot wire if I hadn't broken the wire earlier in the video and been unable to find the spare wire. But that's okay, I just used my utility knife, which brings up a good point. You can cut styrofoam with a knife, but it has to be nice and sharp. Just like shaving, if you're using an old blade, the material will definitely let you know. I patched up this large hole in the back using a cooling fan vent cover, which kind of looks like a big storm drain or something like that. And I'll work on patching up the floor a little later on. There were a few more sections of foam that needed to be cut and glued in place before I could move on fully to the details, including completing the pathway to the upper level and this other structure in the corner. Not really sure what that's for, but we'll make it accessible. With that done, I could pretty much focus entirely on the details at this point, starting with more track underlayment, which conveniently could be folded around corners. I found some sci-fi terrain detailing bits on my mini factory to help add some scale accurate elements to this build. But like I said before, the rocket truck model kit that was sent to me by Tyler Priest was the real MVP of the kit bashing stage. I used bits and pieces of the kit all over this terrain, and I still have a ton left over, which is awesome. Thanks again for that, Tyler. This was a fun part of the build where I could just move around from building to building, adding vents, doors, and greeblies, and anything else to spice up the visuals. I didn't go as heavy with the details as I usually would on a display diorama, because the plan is for this to be as playable as possible. With gaming terrain, it's a good idea to find a balance between durability and detail. I've heard other YouTubers say this before me, but you don't want to be stressing out about a player exhibiting an expected amount of excitement and breaking something that you labored over meticulously. If you're stressing about that the whole time, it'll detract from there and your enjoyment of the gameplay. This build is supposed to reflect that. It's lightweight, fairly durable, and if it breaks, I'm not going to be too concerned about it. Something I did do out of order is use this foam putty to patch up the gaps. I couldn't reach all of them because of the details. I just would have gotten too much of it into the details themselves, but you live and you learn. After that was fully dry, I sanded down everything I could reach, glued a couple more details in place, and that was the construction portion done. I'll turn it around here so you can see from the other angle. This is how I was looking at it most of the time. I gave it a quick look over from every angle to make sure that the visual weight looked right before cleaning up the gigantic mess that I had made in my studio before moving on. The next step in this terrain journey that we're all on together is to add a layer that will protect the foam from small bumps and give it a shell that will protect it from melting when I spray it with spray paint. I made the mix from Mod Podge paint and plaster, which I thinned down with water. The Mod Podge supplies the main protection and flexibility. The plaster adds a little bit of matte finish, and the paint helps me see where I've put it. It doesn't provide the nicest finish or opacity, but it sets us up nicely for the next step, which does. Now that the foam's been protected, I can take it outside and give it a coat of spray paint, or 3 coats of spray paint in this case. I started with a layer of brown over everything, followed by a textured black, which I kind of splotched on, followed by a light tan sprayed from above. This will act as a nice base coat for all of the paints to follow, and that way, in case I miss a spot, everything will still feel tied together. For the rest of the paint scheme, I decided if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I went with the classic desert tan for all of the structures and a metallic gray for all of the mechanical bits. After the sponging, I switched over to an airbrush to build up the warm tones and tan tones, and this footage represents a lot of redoing things because I didn't like the way it was looking, which is okay. There's always room to just redo things if you mess them up. After that, I switched to a gunmetal, which quickly clogged the airbrush, So I switched back to a sponge and dabbed on the rest. Along with over detailing, a trap that somebody might fall into on a project like this is overpainting. Obviously, you want it to be painted nicely and look the part, but it's not going to make that big of a difference when it comes to gameplay, which is why I decided to get it as quickly to a presentable place as possible. If you watched my videos recently, you'll know that I have been investing in improving my mini painting and expanding my proverbial toolbox. Part of having a toolbox is knowing when and where to use certain tools. For a project like this, quick and easy did the trick. I wanted some visual separation between the buildings and the ground, and I knew that a sandy colored sand would blend right in, so I went with a gray colored fine ballast instead. I sealed that with isopropyl alcohol and watered down Elmer's glue. And then finally, to tie it all together, I hit everything with a blast of unifying dust from the airbrush. If there's one thing I hope you gained from this video, it's inspiration to go do stuff like this yourself. Go find a packing insert and make something cool out of it. The last thing to do was to paint the sides of the scenery with black 3.0. After that, I called it good. Like I said at the beginning, I'd like to clear up some space before my upcoming move. But the other reality of the situation is that the same thing that's delayed the project so long is also contributing to a much higher cost. So to be able to afford it, I am going to be auctioning off a bunch of my projects. If you'd like the opportunity to own one of those and contribute to my new studio, you can find the link below. Once I'm in my new workspace, I'll finally be able to complete the Wild Western town, create a permanent display for that, as well as work on a new railroad, which will be bigger than anything I have done before. Super stoked about that. It's been a really long process, but we're almost there. Additionally, I'll be giving away this piece of terrain, preferably to a game or hobby store somewhere near Denver. If you're interested in that, shoot me an email at the email address in my bio. Otherwise, that is it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out as always to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.